Ever stop and think how just one tiny decision, something that seems, I don't know, totally insignificant at the time, can lead to something huge later on?
Oh, absolutely. Like a
Uh,
ripple effect, right?
yeah,
Or maybe sometimes not so huge, depending on the decision.
exactly. It's like that first domino. And, that's why you're here. Tuning in, you want that kind of powerful knowledge, those aha
Yeah.
moments, but without getting buried in information.
And that's precisely what we're aiming for today. We're going deep on habits, not just like the surface stuff, but the real science behind how they form and how we can actually use that knowledge to, well, improve things.
Right. We've looked through a bunch of material articles, notes, all focused on habit formation, behavior change. And what really stood out for me was this story about the author.
Oh, the injury. Yeah.
Yeah, recovering from a really serious injury and using these exact principles, these small steps, to become an academic All-American, it's pretty incredible.
Really shows you, doesn't it? Big changes often don't come from these massive sudden shifts.
No, not usually.
It's more about those small things done consistently, which actually ties right into the science we're about to unpack.
Okay, so that's our mission for this deep dive. Pull out the really actionable stuff about habits from all this material. Stuff you can use, like today. Sounds good.
Let's do it. Where should we start? Maybe the basic model.
Yeah, let's get into the science. How do habits actually, work in our brains?
Okay, so the research really points to this four-step model. It's cue, craving, response, and reward. Think of it like a loop.
A loop the brain runs through.
Yeah.
Okay, let's break that down. First up, the cue. What's that about?
The cue is basically the trigger. It's the signal that tells your brain, hey, a reward might be coming. Our brains are always, and I mean always, scanning for these cues.
Like subconsciously.
A lot of the time, yeah. Think back to our ancestors. They needed cues for survival, right? Food, water, danger.
The smell of berries or seeing a predator.
Exactly. Those were primary reward cues.
But now in our world, it's different cues, but the same idea.
Precisely. We learn cues for secondary rewards.
Mm-hmm.
Things like money, praise, status, that feeling of accomplishment, your phone buzzing maybe.
Ah, okay.
And interestingly, a lot of these modern rewards still kind of tap into those deeper primal drives, survival, reproduction, belonging. The brain's just constantly trying to predict what's good for us.
Okay, so that's the cue, the trigger. What's next in the loop?
Step 2 is the craving. This is the motivation, the actual wanting that the cue sparks. It's the desire for that change in state the reward brings.
So it's not just the reward itself, but the anticipation, that feeling of, ooh, I want that.
That's a huge part of it, yeah. The craving is what pushes you toward the action. And even if it seems like a small craving, like checking social media, it often connects back to a fundamental need, like connection or information. Understanding that deeper motive is key.
Right, makes sense. Cue triggers the craving, then comes the response.
Yep, the response is the actual habit you perform. Could be an action like picking up your phone or even just a thought pattern.
Okay. And what makes us actually do the response?
Well, two main things. How motivated you are, which is tied to the craving, and crucially, how easy it is.
Right.
If it takes too much effort, or you're just not feeling it.
You might not do it, even with the cue and craving.
Exactly. Friction is a habit killer. The easier the response, the more likely you are to do it.
That's important. Okay, cue, craving, response, and finally, the reward.
The reward. This is the payoff, the satisfaction you get from the response. It completes the loop.
How does it complete it?
Because the reward teaches your brain. It says, hey, that sequence cue, craving, response worked out well. Let's remember that. Your brain's like a reward detector. Pleasure reinforces the loop. Disappointment weakens it.
So the reward isn't just the end goal, it's the feedback that tells the brain, do this again next time you see that cue.
You got it. And all four steps, cue, craving, response, reward, they all need to be there for a habit to really stick. If one part is weak, the whole loop kind of falls apart.
Okay, that four-step model is a really clear way to think about it.
Yeah.
But if we want to change our habits, knowing the model is one thing. Where do we actually start?
Right. The absolute first step, according to everything we looked at, is awareness.
Awareness. Why is that so critical?
Because habits, by their very nature, become automatic. They sink below the level of conscious thought.
Yep.
That's efficient for the brain, saves energy.
But it makes them really hard to see, let alone change. They're just running in the background.
Exactly. Like autopilot. And the sources had some great examples of this, didn't they?
Yeah, the teacher asking adults if they'd washed their hands after leaving the classroom environment. Or the lifeguard yelling walk at the pool even when off duty.
It shows how deeply ingrained these patterns get. tied to specific contexts. They just pop out automatically.
And it's not just the actions, right? The cues themselves can become invisible too.
Totally. Stuff that's always there, the cookie jar on the counter, your phone sitting next to you. We stop seeing it consciously, but it's still triggering those automatic responses.
That makes the awareness piece even more important. You can't change a trigger you don't even realize is there. There's that great Carl Jung quote.
Oh, yeah. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate.
That really hits it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Making that unconscious stuff conscious gives you back control.
It's the foundational step. So how do we actually do that? How do we build this awareness? The sources mentioned a couple of tools.
Right. The first one was pointing and calling. Sounds a bit unusual.
It does, but it's fascinating. It's used by railway conductors in Japan. For safety checks, they physically point at, say, a signal and call out its status. Signal is green.
Huh. So pointing and saying it out loud.
Yeah. It forces an automatic check into your conscious awareness. You can't just gloss over it. It makes you pay attention and reduces errors.
I can see how you could adapt that personally. Like literally saying, I'm now picking up my phone to check Instagram.
Exactly. Or, I am opening the fridge. It breaks the automaticity just for a second, makes you notice.
Okay, that's one tool. What was the other one?
The other is the habits scorecard. Basically, you list out your daily habits.
Like everything. Wake up, brush teeth.
Pretty much. Get as detailed as you can. The example list in the sources went through a typical morning routine.
Just writing it down makes you aware, I guess.
Yes, exactly. You start to see the sheer volume of habits, things you do without thinking. And over time, you might start noticing patterns, like what cues lead to what habits. So pointing and calling is for moment-to-moment awareness. The scorecard gives you the bigger picture. Both help make the unconscious conscious.
Okay, makes sense. Awareness first, then what? Once we see our habits and triggers, how do we start building the good ones or ditching the bad ones?
Right. Now we get to the actual changing part.
Yeah.
This brings us to the first law of behavior change, which is make it obvious.
Make it obvious. So for good habits, make the cues really visible.
Precisely. If you want to start a good habit, make the trigger for it impossible to miss. Set yourself up for success.
How do we do that practically? The sources mentioned implementation intentions. What's that?
Yeah, that's a powerful one. Instead of a vague goal like I'll exercise more, you make it super specific about when and where. The formula is, I will behavior at time and location.
Oh, okay. So I will meditate for 5 minutes at 7 a.m. on the living room couch.
Exactly. That specificity creates a really clear cue. It removes the guesswork and makes it much more likely you'll follow through. You know exactly what to do, when, and where.
That clarity probably helps avoid distractions, too. Okay, what else for making cues obvious? There was habit stacking.
Right, habit stacking. This uses an existing habit as the cue for a new habit. The formula is, after current habit, I will take my vitamin.
So you piggyback the new habit onto one that's already automatic. Like, after I pour my morning coffee, I will take my vitamins.
Perfect example. The key is choosing the right current habit to be the trigger.
How do you choose the right one?
Well, that habit scorecard comes in handy again. Look at your list of existing routines and find a reliable one that happens at the time and place you want to do the new habit. Make sure it flows naturally.
So finding those little moments, those connection points in your day.
Exactly. And this all ties into a bigger idea from Kurt Lewin. Behavior is a function of the person and their environment. BFPE.
Meaning our surroundings have a massive impact.
Huge. Often the easiest way to change behavior isn't necessarily changing yourself, but changing your environment. Our habits are really context dependent.
We just do what's easiest or most obvious in the situation.
Pretty much. Think about product placement, or why you grab the snack that's right at eye level. We're wired to respond to what's prominent. Our senses pick up on those obvious cues.
So designing our environment is key for making good habits obvious. What are some ways to do that?
Simple things, really. Want to practice guitar? Leave it in the middle of the living room, not hidden in a closet. Want to drink more water? Keep a water bottle on your desk. Put your running shoes by the door.
Make the cue unavoidable.
Right. Make the desired action the path of least resistance. You could even try having multiple cues for the same good habit, just like smokers might have several things that trigger the urge to light up.
That's a good point. Increase the odds the cue gets noticed.
And there's the idea of one space, one use, trying not to mix contexts.
Like, don't work in bed.
Exactly. Have a dedicated space for work, another for relaxing, another for sleeping. It helps strengthen the association between the environment and the intended habit. The author mentioned setting up a distinct home office really helped them focus.
That makes sense. New environments can also be good for this, right? Less baggage.
Yeah, when you're in a new place, you don't have all those old, ingrained cues fighting for your attention. It's easier to establish new patterns.
Okay, so that covers making good habits obvious. What about the flip side? Getting rid of bad habits.
It's the inverse of the first law. Make it invisible.
Cut off the cue at the source.
Exactly. If the cue doesn't happen, the habit loop doesn't even start.
Yeah.
And the research is pretty clear. It's way more effective to avoid the trigger than to rely on willpower to resist it once you see it.
Because those habit pathways in the brain are really strong once they're formed.
Very strong, like grooves. Trying to constantly fight temptation is exhausting and often doesn't work long term. It's easier just to remove the temptation in the first place.
And if your environment is full of triggers for bad habits, it's constantly working against you.
Totally. It makes building good habits way harder if you're constantly being pulled back by negative cues.
So practical strategies for making bad cues invisible.
Reduce exposure. If scrolling Instagram wastes your time, maybe remove the app from your phone's home screen or log out. Create separation. Leave your phone in another room while you work. Change your route home if you always get tempted by that fast food place.
It's about actively removing those triggers from your immediate environment, creating friction for the bad habit.
Exactly. Make it harder to even start the unwanted behavior. The animal studies mentioned were interesting here too.
Oh, the gulls and the geese.
Yeah, Tim Bergen's work. Baby gulls instinctively pecking at a red spot, geese retrieving any round object near the nest. It shows how powerful, simple, specific cues can be in triggering automatic behavior, even instinctual stuff.
And we're maybe not so different. Our modern environment is full of engineered cues.
Especially with food. The food industry is brilliant at creating these supernormal stimuli, enhancing the look, smell, texture, and hitting those salt, sugar, fat buttons that we're wired to crave from our evolutionary past.
They make the cues impossible to ignore, basically exploiting our biology.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And this ties into dopamine, right? The anticipation of the reward, triggered by the cue, releases dopamine, which makes us want it even more. It fuels the craving.
So the cue itself becomes desirable. Wow. The Polgar chess experiment was another powerful example of environment.
Oh, absolutely. Raising kids in an environment just saturated with chess books, boards, constant conversation, it basically made chess the most obvious, normal, and attractive thing to do. And, well, they became prodigies.
It really shows the power of immersing yourself in the cues of the desired skill or habit. And it wasn't just the physical cues, right? Social norms matter too.
Hugely. We're social animals. We want to fit in. We tend to imitate the habits of three groups: the close, friends, family; the many, the tribe, the culture; and the powerful, those with status.
That explains a lot about why habits spread in groups, the story about people starting smoking because their friends did.
Exactly. Peer pressure is real, driven by that need to belong. But the flip side, the Alan Carr example for quitting smoking, shows you can also change how you perceive the cues.
How so?
His method involves reframing the act of smoking, changing the mental associations. So the cue, seeing someone smoke feeling stressed, no longer triggers the same craving because you've changed what it means to you. You've made the cue less attractive, less powerful internally.
So it's about both the external environment making cues obvious or invisible, and the internal one, how we interpret those cues.
Precisely. It all comes back to controlling the triggers.
Okay, so to wrap up this part on the first law, for good habits, make those cues pop. Make them visible, easy to spot. For bad habits, do the opposite. Hide the cues, reduce exposure, make them invisible. It's really about designing your world inside and out to support where you want to go.
That's a perfect summary. Understanding and using this law gives you a huge amount of leverage in shaping your own behavior. It's foundational.
Okay, so that covers the first crucial law dealing with the cue. Next time, we'll dig into the second law, which is all about the craving, make it attractive. But for now, here's something to think about.
Yeah.
Think about one place where you spend a lot of time. Could be your desk, your kitchen, maybe even your car. Just take a minute and really look around using this idea of cues. What's obvious? What's maybe hidden but still influencing you? What little tweaks could you make to the cues in that space to nudge yourself, even just slightly, towards the habits you want?
That's a great exercise. Just starting to see your environment through that lens of cue management.
Exactly. Explore it with this new awareness. You might be surprised what you find.